Do you remember when time moved slower, measured only by the gentle simmering of a soup pot? In the Gascony countryside of 1955, my mother's kitchen was the warm heart of our entire world. She didn't need fancy ingredients, just patience, an old iron pot, and the vegetables from our garden. Cooking wasn't a chore back then, it was a daily rhythm of survival, love, and deep tradition. Let me take you back to taste the 10 rustic soups that defined my childhood winters. First was the cabbage stew, the king of soups, a thick stew that sustained the farmers through hard labor. The cabbage had to be fresh, its leaves crinkled and green, chopped roughly to keep their texture. The white beans were soaked overnight, swelling up like little pearls waiting to release their creamy starch. But the secret was the preserved duck leg buried in fat, adding a rich, salty depth. Everything went into the pot together. In 1955, we didn't sauté much, we let time do the work. It simmered for hours, filling the house with the scent of cabbage, cured meat, and earthy beans. We knew it was cooking right when the broth turned opaque, marrying the vegetables into one united flavor. Mother would check it only once or twice. Patience was the most important ingredient in her kitchen. When dinner came, the pot was placed directly on the table, commanding respect like a guest of honor. The true test of this stew? The wooden spoon had to stand straight up in the thick mixture. It was dense, hearty, and hot enough to chase away the chill of the damp French winter. The duck meat, having surrendered to the heat, would melt instantly on your tongue like savory butter. We always ate it with stale country bread, which soaked up the juices and gained a second life. Then came the wine ritual, pouring red wine into the last few spoonfuls of broth. Lifting the bowl to drink directly was not bad manners, it was the highest compliment to the cook. This stew taught us that great things take time, and that even humble cabbage can become a feast. But not every day was a feast. Sometimes, we had to rely on the French peasant soup. This was the soup of survival, born from the lean times when the pantry shelves were nearly bare. It started not with stock, but with salt pork, tiny cubes of cured fat to flavor the water. She rendered the fat slowly until the kitchen smelled savory, tricking us into thinking meat was coming. Then, she did something unthinkable today. She poured in plain water. No chicken broth, just water. Into that water went whatever the garden offered, limp carrots, turnips, or the outer leaves of celery. Flavor came from the earth, not a packet. Dried thyme and a bay leaf were the only seasonings. To make it filling, a handful of vermicelli or rice was thrown in at the very end. It looked simple, perhaps too simple, but it was a testament to a mother's resourcefulness. We ate it quietly. It wasn't rich, but it was warm, salty, and surprisingly comforting. The bread was essential here, acting as a sponge to turn the thin broth into a meal. I realize now that she often gave us the vegetables and kept only the broth for herself. That peasant soup is gone from modern menus, replaced by cream and excess. But I miss its honesty. When the onions were harvested, however, the kitchen transformed into a factory of tears and sweetness. Onion soup today is a restaurant fancy, but for us, it was the definition of cheap luxury. Hours of slicing followed, we all cried, stinging eyes filled with the promise of what was coming. The alchemy began with butter, real, yellow farm butter, melting until it sang in the heavy pan. The onions filled the pan to the brim, a white mountain that would soon collapse into gold. Stirring wasn't constant, but it was crucial. We had to wait for the deep, dark caramelization. A splash of white wine released the bits from the bottom, creating a syrup of pure, concentrated flavor. Then came the broth, transforming the caramelized onions into a dark, rich soup that smelled like heaven. But the soup was just the stage. The stars were the thick rounds of toasted baguette, dry and crisp. We grated Swiss cheese generously. In 1955, cheese was precious, so we used every single crumb. The assembly was architectural: soup, bread, and a blanket of cheese thick enough to hide what lay beneath. Under the heat, the cheese didn't just melt, it became a golden, bubbling crust that sealed in the heat. It arrived at the table dangerous and beautiful, a volcano of flavor waiting to be breached by a spoon. Breaking that crust was a moment of joy. The cheese stretched endlessly, connecting the bowl to our hungry mouths. It was messy and loud, a soup made from humble tears that ended in family laughter. Sundays were different. Sundays belonged to the church, and to the slow, ceremonial cooking of the beef stew. The name literally translates to pot on the fire. It was the national dish, and every family had their version. We used the cheapest cuts, shin, oxtail, or shank, meats that required patience to reveal their tenderness. The secret to the golden broth? An onion, halved and charred black directly on the flame, added for color. The water had to be cold initially. As it boiled, we skimmed the foam religiously to keep the broth clear. A bundle of herbs was tied with string, parsley, thyme, and bay leaf, giving off a magic aroma. Vegetables went in much later. We wanted them whole and tender, not boiled into mush. The marrow bones were the prize. Mother wrapped them in cloth so the precious marrow wouldn't melt away. This stew is 2 meals in one. First, we drank the broth, pure and restorative, cleansing the soul. Then came the meat and vegetables, served with coarse sea salt, pickles, and strong Dijon mustard. But the best bite? Spreading the hot, fatty marrow on toast and sprinkling it with gray salt. It was a meal that made you want to nap by the fire. A Sunday ritual of complete contentment. As the days grew shorter and the leaves turned gold, the forest gave us our next gift, chestnuts. Chestnut soup wasn't just food, it was a harvest celebration. We gathered them ourselves from the forest floor. Preparation was tedious. Each nut needed a small X cut into its shell before roasting or boiling. Peeling them while hot was a painful labor of love, burning our fingers to ensure the best flavor. Once peeled, they bathed in milk and cream, softening slowly until they were ready to crumble. We didn't have electric blenders. We used a hand-cranked food mill to press the nuts into a velvety puree. The result was a soup of incredible elegance, earthy, sweet, and nutty, warming you from the inside out. It tasted like the forest itself. It was the flavor of autumn distilled into a warm, creamy cup. As winter deepened, the orange pumpkin stored in the cool cellar became our sunshine. Pumpkin soup was a battle to prepare. The skin was tough as armor, protecting the sweet flesh inside. We scooped out the seeds, saving them to roast later. Nothing in our kitchen was ever wasted. Unlike Americans who use spices, we cooked it simply with milk, letting the vegetable speak for itself. The only seasoning allowed was salt, pepper, and a whisper of freshly grated nutmeg on top. It poured like liquid gold. In the gray of winter, eating this was like swallowing the summer sun. These soups were our clock. They told us where we were in the year better than any calendar. And then, there were lentils, small, green, and iron-rich. They were the poor man's meat. We used volcanic green lentils. They held their shape and had a peppery bite. To flavor the mountain of beans, Mother buried a smoked sausage deep inside the pot like a treasure. As it cooked, the sausage released its smoky fat, coating every single lentil in a glossy sheen. When the sausage was plump and cooked, Mother removed it carefully, slicing it into thin, precious coins. A final spoon of sharp mustard was stirred into the pot, cutting through the richness of the earth. The lentils remained firm, popping gently between teeth, while the sausage melted away, salty and comforting. It was a humble dish, brown and unassuming, but it carried the strength of the volcanic soil within. You might wonder about the scraps. In 1955, the garbage bin was the greatest enemy of our kitchen. This brings us to the vegetable broth, a clear soup born entirely from what others might throw away. Before peeling, every vegetable was scrubbed clean as a whistle, because we knew the skins were destiny. Even the dry, papery skins of onions were saved. They gave the broth a rich, golden amber color. Simmered gently with water, these scraps released minerals and sweetness that sat hidden deep within the fibers. After hours, we strained it through a cloth. The solids went to the chickens, the gold stayed with us. This was the invalid soup. When fever struck, this light, restorative nectar was the only medicine we needed. It tasted of pure garden essence, clean, slightly sweet, and full of the invisible vitamins of the soil. Making something from nothing was her superpower. It taught us that value depends on how you look at things. When winter finally broke and the snow melted into the river, the fields turned a vibrant, hopeful green. This was the signal for sorrel soup. We didn't buy it, we hunted for it in the wild meadows. Sorrel is a wild herb with arrow-shaped leaves. It hides in the grass, waiting for sharp eyes. To the raw tongue, it was shocking, acidic, sour, like biting into a green lemon wrapped in a leaf. We needed baskets of it. Like spinach, a mountain of fresh sorrel would vanish into a tiny handful when cooked. The preparation was tedious, removing every tough stem so the final soup would be smooth as silk. Thrown into hot butter, the bright green leaves surrendered instantly, turning into a dark, olive-colored puree. It looked unappealing at first, a swampy, dark green stew that smelled intensely sharp and grassy. But the magic happened at the end. A liaison of egg yolks and heavy cream was whisked frantically. As the cream hit the soup, the color transformed from muddy green to a pale, elegant pastel jade. We finished it with croutons fried in butter, adding a necessary crunch to the velvet soup. The taste was a revelation. The cream tamed the wild sourness, creating a perfect balance of acid and fat. Eating sorrel soup meant winter was officially dead. It was the taste of new life and long days. Finally, our journey takes us away from the farm, down to the rocky coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Here, the farmers were fishermen, and they too had a soup born from poverty and necessity. The fisherman's stew, a name that now costs a fortune in restaurants, but started as a fisherman's scrap bucket. The stars were the scorpionfish, ugly, spiny rockfish that were too bony to sell to the tourists. The base was olive oil, onions, and tomatoes, cooked down until they were sweet and jammy. The only luxury allowed was saffron, just a pinch, but enough to turn the soup a sunset orange. The name means boil and lower. It required a furious, rolling boil to fuse oil and water together. We didn't simmer gently here. We boiled it hard, extracting every ounce of gelatin from the fish bones. While it boiled, we made the spicy paste, a fiery mix of garlic, chili, and olive oil to wake the dead. Service was a ritual. The fish was carefully removed to a platter, leaving only the golden broth in the bowl. We rubbed stale bread with garlic, spread the spicy paste thick, and floated it on the steaming soup. The bread drank the soup, becoming a spicy, savory sponge that exploded with flavor in your mouth. It was the taste of the sea's anger tamed by the cook's patience. A chaotic harmony of the ocean. 10 soups, 10 stories of survival, from the mountains of Gascony to the shores of Marseille. But a French soup is never eaten alone. It is married, until death do them part, to the bread. This wasn't fluffy supermarket bread. It was a 4-pound wheel with a crust thick enough to cut your gums. Father cut it the old way, holding the loaf against his heart and slicing inwards. A dangerous act of love. Fresh bread was for butter, but for soup, we preferred it stale, hardened by days of waiting in the air. Only old bread has the strength to stand up to hot broth without dissolving into a mushy disgrace. The bread was our second spoon. It wiped the bowl so clean. Washing up was merely a formality. But before the bread or the pot, the story of every soup began out there, in the muddy garden. The supermarket didn't exist. If we wanted leeks for the beef stew, we had to wrestle them from the earth. My mother's hands were permanently stained with soil. That dirt was the true seasoning of our lives. Winter cabbages stood in the frost like soldiers. The cold made them sweeter, turning starch into natural sugar. Beneath the house lay the cellar, a dark, cool temple where we kept the ghosts of summer alive. Rows of jars shone in the dark, tomatoes, beans, and duck confit, waiting for their moment to jump into the pot. Potatoes slept in wooden crates. We had to check them weekly, removing the bad ones so rot wouldn't spread. Cooking these soups wasn't about following a recipe time. It was about listening to the rhythm of the day. The soup demanded presence, not action. Mother would knit or mend clothes, just keeping the fire company. The windows would fog up, separating our warm, scented world from the freezing reality outside. The salt was gray and damp, harvested from the sea. It didn't just add saltiness, it added the ocean's minerals. Above our heads hung the summer's ghosts, dried thyme and rosemary, waiting to be crumbled into winter's pot. Our table setting was simple. Mismatched plates, heavy glasses, and napkins that had been mended a dozen times. Soup was often shared. If a neighbor stopped by, water was added to the pot. The door was never locked. There was no television, no distraction, just the sound of spoons and the warmth of the broth connecting us. The silver ladle was the only valuable thing we owned, passed down from a grandmother I never knew. I can still see her profile in the steam, blowing gently on the ladle, the high priestess of the kitchen. On freezing nights, the bowl was a hand warmer first, and a meal second. It thawed our frozen bones. The pot was never fully emptied. The remains of tonight became the base for tomorrow, an endless chain of flavor. When the meal was done, the kitchen breathed a sigh of relief. The fire died down to glowing embers. There was no running hot water. She boiled a kettle to wash the plates, scrubbing them with a block of soap. Every chip on those plates had a story, a memory of a clumsy child or a hasty Christmas dinner. Before bed, the cycle began again. Beans were set to soak for tomorrow. The kitchen never truly slept. One by one, the lights went out, leaving only the smell of thyme and wood smoke to guard the house. Today, my kitchen is bright, full of gadgets, and stainless steel. It is efficient, but it is cold. We blend our soups in seconds now. We seek smooth perfection, erasing the texture of the ingredients. And we eat while scrolling, feeding our eyes with data instead of feeding our souls with silence. But when I close my eyes, I am back there. I can feel the rough wood table under my elbows. Those soups were not just food. They were a daily lesson in patience, in waiting for the good things. We have gained time with our microwaves. But I wonder, have we lost the flavor of time itself? Maybe it is time to slow down, to peel a carrot by hand, to wait for the water to boil. Turn off the phone, light a candle, let the soup simmer until the house smells like a home again. Because the best ingredient my mother ever used wasn't the cream or the dough. It was her time. If you remember these flavors, or wish you did, share your story below. Let's keep the pot boiling. But the memory isn't just visual. It is the sound, the distinct, rhythmic language of the boiling pot. Tap, tap, tap. The wooden spoon hitting the iron rim was the metronome of our daily existence. The soup changed with the light outside. Heavy and dark in January, light and green in June. In the heat of July, the soup turned cold, leeks and potatoes, chilled to soothe the harvest sweat. In December, the fat formed a protective white seal on the leftovers, preserving the flavor for weeks. She left no blog, no videos, only this notebook, stained with the very ingredients listed on its pages. A handful, she wrote, but whose hand? Her small hand was the only measuring cup that mattered. She taught me that peeling was an art. The skin should come off in one long, unbroken ribbon. My hands were clumsy then. I didn't know I was learning a language that would outlive her. The cycle was perfect. The scraps fed the chickens. The chickens gave eggs. The eggs enriched the soup. Now, 70 years later, I stand in my kitchen, guiding the small hands of my own granddaughter. The tools have changed. We have safety peelers and non-stick pans. But the motion remains exactly the same. We are making the peasant soup today. I want her to taste the poverty and the richness of 1955. She closes her eyes and inhales. For a second, the years collapse, and she is in Gascony. The stove is electric, but the fire inside the pot is ancient. It is the same chemical magic. What is missing is the silence. The modern world is too loud for the soup to whisper its secrets. So we close the window. We create a bubble of time where only the simmering matters. She tastes it. She is surprised that water and vegetables can taste so deep, so meaty, without
delicious.
meat. In that smile, I see my mother. The recipe has successfully jumped the gap of 3 generations. Technology changes, fashion changes, but a simmering onion smells exactly the same in any century. Cabbage stew, onion, sorrel, pumpkin. These are not just dishes, they are chapters of a manual on how to live. They taught us to use what we have, to respect the season, and to find comfort in simplicity. My mother's kitchen is gone now. The house was sold, The cast iron pot's likely rusted away. But the kitchen lives on in this pot. As long as we cook these soups, she is not truly gone. So I ask you, what is the soup of your childhood? What flavor brings you back home? Don't let it die. Write it down. Cook it this weekend. Save the history of your own family. Like oil on water, memories spread and touch everything. One drop is enough to flavor a life. In the steam, I see the hills of Gascony, the stone walls, and the smoke from the chimney. The fire is out now. The meal is ready. It is time to sit, to eat, and to remember. Enjoy your meal, my friends. May your bowls be full and your hearts be warm. Time passes, the soup cools, but the love remains. Good night, Gascony. Good night, Mother. Subscribe to help us find more lost recipes before they disappear forever.